What's going on, Babylonians? It's me, Songs of Rage, back with another Outriders WorldSlayer video to bring to you, and today we are kickstarting off the Legendary Weapon Guide series again, which we did actually from last year with all the brand new goodies that WorldSlayer is actually dropping to us, and this is to also help you decide what you need in your new updated builds. Today's video is going to be all about the Mythos and its tier 3 mod called Omen, so without further ado, let's get right into it. So the first thing we should have a look at is the gun in of itself. Now obviously this is probably one of the most stunning guns that actually does exist in Outriders and just in general, and this also includes the vanilla game because I genuinely love how this gun actually looks. When we have a look at the stats though, it does actually come with armor pierce, close range damage and healing received, and this does tend towards kind of a firepower devastator kind of build, just due to the fact that it does come with armor pierce and close range damage, so definitely not something that you want to primarily run with when it comes to your firepower technomancers. Now the tier 3 mod of Omen shoots a cover-piercing anomaly projectile that inflicts bleed, deals 703,000 points of damage, and deals a status that increases damage received by 30% for 3 seconds, and this has a cooldown of 4 seconds, so therefore it is impossible to be able to actually get this to stack, and we'll cover that in a second as to why you can't actually have 2 of these on in the first place, but also we do have the global cooldown on that. So Omen has a lot going for it, so let's try and break it down into little bits here. So the fact of the matter is Omen is able to pierce through cover. This means that you don't actually have to be able to land a bullet specifically on the enemy in the first place. You can actually just shoot it towards where a health bar actually is, and therefore you can actually just get the hit through that kind of means as well. You'll see some of the footage in the background with me actually being able to play around with that, and that means that enemies in cover are not as safe as they actually do think they are. The fact that the projectile also inflicts bleed also helps towards the classes like Devastator as well as Technomancer when they do actually go top tree with the Pax tree. Now the reason why it obviously helps with the Pax tree is the fact that if you do go for dissection when it comes to Technomancers, you can get an additional 10% damage when it comes to every single status that you actually do inflict, and therefore because you are applying, if you were playing a Blighted Rounds kind of build, which you normally would do for a top tree, that means you actually would be able to get Toxic as well as Bleed, which is instantly 20% and more than actually what you would have been able to do in the first place, and obviously this is before we even apply any kind of like freeze or any kind of other status that the Blighted Rounds also would have been able to apply in itself. The damage on its own is actually kind of on the low side, and that's help obviously keep this this mod kind of balanced. But that doesn't mean that you can't actually scale this up to some really nice numbers. I mean, obviously I managed to get this 703k to around about 4 million at one point, and that's just due to some of the modifiers I actually had on my build, and therefore it can actually be a very good offensive tool in as well in of itself. Now the last thing that we also need to cover is the fact that it applies a status that increases damage received by 30% for 3 seconds. Now obviously this doesn't specify whether it's going to be weapon damage or anomaly damage, similar to like how we have for like Despair. Because it is just a blanket 30% for every single thing, it means it can actually benefit firepower builds as well as anomaly power builds, which helps with its functionality and helps to be able to keep it kind of versatile. Now, me personally, I do prefer this on anomaly power builds, and the reason why is because we do have 2 downsides when it comes to Omen, and that's the fact that one, it's a very slow traveling projectile, which means that it actually will take a little time to be able to get to some of the enemies, and especially on beast levels, we actually can get some beasts that can jump out of the way of these. Kind of case in point, we do have Strix, which do appear in levels like Eye of the Storm and Heart of the Wild, which can actually fly out the way if you're not close enough to this, so they actually will kind of detect it and actually get out of the way, which makes it very difficult to actually hit those kind of enemies. Other enemies like Venomous Bephoros are obviously very quick and very nimble in of themselves, and obviously unless you actually grab them in their kind of own kind of animation when they're actually doing their attack, they can actually just jump to the side of this and they can actually miss from there. So the fact that this kind of doesn't necessarily help in beast levels, but obviously it will help with any kind of humanoid enemies that are taking cover, is definitely a godsend in that sense as well. The second downside to be able to obviously take into consideration is if you actually do regularly perform Eye of the Storm, this is a very blinding kind of effect that does actually come from the gun. This blinding effect will obviously affect your ability to be able to track enemies, obviously as the more it travels towards where you're actually shooting, so obviously you would be shooting at an enemy to be able to get the full benefit, which means that they can actually hide behind this and it can be very difficult to actually land follow-up shots. The other thing to actually pay attention to is in Eye of the Storm as well, it is a very blinding effect for your teammates, which means that they can also suffer from the exact same thing depending on obviously where it goes, if it goes in front of an enemy or if it goes behind or as it travels through. It's not too much of a problem. If your teammates are stood next to you, they will also get blinded, similar to how you will actually feel, and while it doesn't last too long because it is actually constantly traveling, it is something that does actually cause an annoyance, and the fact that it does come back every 4 seconds and there's only a 1 second downtime means that you're pretty much always going to have some kind of Omen on the field at all times. Now, if we do take those downsides into consideration, the Mythos and the Omen is still a massive improvement over most of the things that we actually do have in Outriders Vanilla. So therefore, I would highly recommend that you pick up Omen. Whether you're playing Anomaly Power or Firepower, it's gonna be able to help you out massively in and of itself. I primarily use this on anomaly power builds because I like to think that my skills kind of need a little bit of a help to be able to try and compete with things like Firepower Techno, so therefore I do actually like having the additional bonus of the 30%, and the fact that we do actually have it travelling through means that any kind of like skills that also travel through kind of cover as well, similar to like an Earthquake from a Devastator, means that they can benefit from the full advantage of this as well. So that pretty much wraps up the gun guide for the Mythos and the Omen Tier 3 mod. I hope you've learned something useful with ourselves. If you did, make sure you have dropped a like and a subscribe. It really does help the channel out. And that just leaves me to say, keep yourself safe, keep yourselves well, and I'll see you all on that next video.